ideally the motivation is just like in any genre of writing to tell a good story. You know, what happened to me, what's profound and meaningful is not automatically profound and meaningful to someone else.
Welcome to Your Creative Midlife. I'm Betsy Bush, and I'm wondering if in your midlife now, maybe you're in retirement or you're an empty nester and you're starting to think, I want to do something creative. I'm ready to clear the decks and start something new. And I've always been interested in writing. Maybe it's time I explore memoir writing. Well, if that is something that is of interest to you, you are in the right place because I have a fabulous memoir writing coach, teacher, workshop leader, Sarah Saffian. She's not only is she a writer, a workshop leader extraordinaire, she's also her own author, and we'll hear about her book a little bit later. She's also made a pivot to psychotherapy. She's a licensed clinical social worker and a teacher. Her memoir, Ithaca, chronicles the experience of being an adoptee who was found by her birth family. She teaches memoir and profile writing at the Iowa Summer Festival, the Iowa Summer Writing Festival. As a therapist, Sarah counsels individual clients and runs support groups in private practice in New York City. And she's created a model called Therapeutic writing using memoir prompts as a tool for encouraging reflection, processing, and discovery. And I'm thrilled to have Sarah here with me today. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Betsy.
Right. What do you find people come to you in a memoir writing class? What do you think their motivations are? What are they hoping to do or discover?
That's a really excellent question because there are various motivations to write memoir, and not to judge, but I think some lend themselves more to a well-told story than others.
Yes.
So admittedly, some people are motivated by revenge or wanting to set the record straight or seeking pity. Maybe wanting something cathartic for themselves. And I'll talk about that in terms of how writing for yourself therapeutically is different from writing for other people. But when you say a class or a workshop, as a leader of that, as a teacher, my understanding is that they want to write to make other people care, to entertain and enlighten other people who might not have a built-in reason to care. So ideally, the motivation is just like in any genre of writing to tell a good story. You know, what happened to me, what's profound and meaningful is not automatically profound and meaningful to someone else. I always use the metaphor with my students of a lump of clay versus a sculpture. So your life experience, or maybe even what you write in your journal, is a lump of clay, the raw material, right? And then in the class, the workshop, whether it's at Iowa or you and I work together at Sarah Lawrence, what do we do with that clay? So what sculpture do we create to entertain and enlighten other people, to make them care for their own reasons about my personal experience?
It's interesting because I think a lot of new writers, someone in midlife just puts it all down on paper and maybe doesn't understand that aspect of storytelling. Making it interesting to other people as opposed to, you won't believe what happened to me when I was 5, or for example.
Right.
And so I can understand your interest or your turn to therapy, because I think a lot of the writing really becomes therapeutic.
That's right.
Right. I mean, you had an interesting saying in class, which was judge the writing, not the life.
That's right.
And so there's always this interesting push and pull between wanting to be completely honest or, I think a lot of memoir writing is very exposes a lot.
Oh, yeah.
In some ways that may not be appropriate, or,
Right.
To what end are you telling us this about your relationship with your parents or this thing that happened to you? But in some cases, it does serve to tell a story.
Yeah.
How do you distinguish that? How do you help someone get to the storytelling and get past the revenge part?
Yeah, that's right. And I've always felt that way about memoir writing. Even when I wrote Ithaca a long time ago, I had been a journalist previously. So maybe that's why I was tough with myself about what I call the who cares question. Mm-hmm. Unless there's a built-in reason to care because I'm a public figure or something like that. If no one knows who you are, then the story has to be what draws the reader in. Right. So, but since becoming a therapist, to your point, I'm really aware of the distinction between the two, and they're both valid. They're just, and the line between them can be kind of thin, but they're distinct. Yeah. And so, all the more I make the distinction, and I'm glad you remembered, like critique the work and not the life, because I think that just helps everyone feel safe. So in other words, if I'm, again, in a memoir workshop, not a support group, not a therapy environment, I make that point sometimes, and it may feel artificial, but when we're workshopping someone's piece, we might say, refer to the protagonist in the third person, like the narrator or the main character, or she, he, or they, and not addressing the author directly as you, which can feel more confronting and can blur that line more. Mm-hmm. And so what's important is all that we have the right or the access to critique is the words on the page. Mm-hmm. So what do we think about that? So not why did you do, feel, think, that in your life. Mm-hmm. We have no right to critique that, but I don't understand the protagonist's motivation in this scene, or I find that I don't feel very sympathetic toward her because of this and such specific reason, or I'm confused by the dynamic between these two characters, so we're not critiquing the person in their life experience, and it also helps the author keep that clear. That, well, it's clear to me because it happened to me, but I'm not communicating it clearly. Good for me to know as a writer, as a human being who had the experience, that's another category. Yeah. So, and sometimes I've had, and because the line is thin and fuzzy sometimes, I've had students in workshop in Iowa who are not emotionally ready. And that's not a flaw. It's simply not the right environment. If all you can tolerate is either this is brilliant and amazing and beautiful, just heaping praise on the work, or, oh, that sounds so hard, I feel so bad for you. If that's all the feedback you can tolerate, you're probably not ready to write about your life experience for other readers, and I've had some tough conversations with people at Iowa, and they say, well, this traumatic event happened 10 years ago. I've been in so much therapy and I really want to put my story out there. And I say, listen, I'm a therapist. I get it. And it's not a flaw of your writing. I can just tell how close you are to the material still. In other words, like you said, a lot of memoir is raw and exposing, and that can be very dramatic and very effective storytelling. But the author, the person sitting with the pen or at the keyboard, hopefully is not in the same emotional place as the protagonist. As memoirists, we're both the storyteller and the main character, but can they be in different emotional places? So we could tell about the rawness of our former selves, but hopefully we're not writing and like reeling with the drama still. Right.
I remember reading Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes, saying he wrote that book when he retired. I think at 65, 66. Yeah. And he told an interviewer, I couldn't have written this book earlier in my life because it would have been too bitter.
Yes, I know.
And he was, it's such a wonderful book. And I think it really took the world by storm that he could relay what was really a Dickensian childhood in so many ways, but he was able to incorporate so much humor, understanding and perspective, and it really coming up with a great book that if he had written it, as he said, a few years before, it wouldn't have been the same book.
That's right. And he's right. And we have to honor the space for multiple truths. I mean, definitely multiple truths among, family members or loved ones or characters in the memoir. So, if I tell a memoir and my, father writes about the same experience, it may and kind of should be different because we have different perspectives. Similarly, when we choose to write, we are different. Our perspectives change. So I've heard that quote from him. I had the opportunity to interview him when I was a journalist, which was so fruitful. Wow. I loved Angela's Ashes like everyone else. And he does have humor in it. He does, but it is heartbreaking too. Yes. It's not like he's sugarcoating it or diminishing the drama and the Dickensian nature, indeed. But he has that emotional detachment to tell the story without sounding self-pitying, or he, as a retired adult, had this great perspective on his childhood in Ireland.
Yes.
And so the story was that much more effective than if he told it like, when he was in his 20s, for example. Mm-hmm. You're right. He would have been too bitter. And I think he knew himself well enough. You're kind of ready. My friend and colleague, Hope Edelman, who wrote Motherless Daughters and other wonderful memoir and nonfiction books, says you're ready to write a memoir when you have an understanding of what your experience means. Like, what's the meaning of it? Not just that it happened, but what does it mean? And as you said a few minutes ago, why are you telling us this? Right. Why? So I think he understood what it meant. It wasn't just that it had happened, and it was important to him. That's not enough.
Let's take a little bit of a step back. For someone who's never been in a memoir writing class, typically.
And I think that it's just as valuable of a learning experience to offer feedback to a classmate as it is to receive it yourself. Because some people might think like, well, I kind of just want to work on my book and I don't want to have to read other people's stuff.
Sure.
But you learn so much reading someone else, and with the guidance of someone like me, figuring out how to discern and communicate what's working well and why, and what isn't working so well and why, and being as specific and respectful as possible in that feedback. So you learn so much that you can then turn on your own work when you're taking in feedback and when you're revising it. And there are lots of ways a memoir workshop can go. If it's more of an open levels class, which is what I usually do, in other words, you don't have to have a memoir already in progress. You might have an idea. But I give prompts, and it's generated through the time that we spend together as a group. I offer writing prompts, like at a typical week-long workshop in Iowa, for example. I'll offer a prompt every night, and people will write short, just a few pages, and then we'll workshop it the next day. If it's a more advanced workshop, I've done personal essay and full-length memoir, then they'll bring in pages they've written in advance, and we'll spend more time workshopping. So what's interesting to me as a therapist is, you mentioned my therapeutic writing approach, which is not new to me. There are other therapists who've done this under other names in the past, but it really combines my areas of experience and interest. And I use the same prompts for therapy students or in support therapy clients or support groups, or for, craft workshop students. But it's for a different purpose. So, if I say, well, why don't you write a letter to that family member you're estranged from? Or why don't you write about that childhood experience in the present tense to put yourself back in that immediate moment? Or what if you write about that past experience from the other person's perspective to get a more 360-degree view of the situation? It's for reflection and introspection for a therapy client. For a workshop student who's trying to tell a story for other people, it's to prompt that creativity. So same writing prompt, but for a different goal, for a different end, if that makes sense.
Do you find that people are scared to write things down? Like, if I wrote about that, so-and-so would be mad at me or would dispute this or that sort of thing? Because
right.
I find that there's probably a lot of self-editing. I'm not even going to put it down on paper.
Right. Definitely. And I actually have a lecture I give at Iowa, and there's a recording of it on my website that I title The Politics of Writing About Loved Ones. Because how do you navigate those real life relationships when your characters are based on those people who may have thoughts and feelings about how they're depicted or how that situation went down. And, fiction writers' characters arguably don't like talk back to the author so much, right? And in terms of the self-editing, you're right. Like, I'm not even going to put it down. I really try to encourage students and, beginning memoir writers, put it down and no one has to see it or even know about it until you decide. Yeah. Like, don't censor yourself prematurely. And the other thing, and people disagree about this. Leonard Lopate thinks that, or Philip Lopate, sorry, his brother, The Art of the Personal Essay, he says, absolutely don't give your writing to your loved ones to read before you publish it. Don't give them that much power. And it depends on the relationships. I can't speak generally, but with Ithaca, I did give it to every family member because I didn't guarantee that I'd make every change they requested, but I felt like I needed them. I would have been much more anxious if it was published and out in bookstores and I couldn't make any changes and then they reacted. Yeah. So I said, I will, read it, don't read it. You have 2 weeks, time. I gave them a time limit and you can tell me what you think and feel. I guarantee I'll hear you out and we'll have a conversation about it at least. And that put everyone at ease. And actually, I think that sometimes was enough power to give a loved one where they ended up not reacting as strongly as they might have if they have felt like, you're writing about me and I don't know what you're putting in it and I can't do anything about it. When they felt heard, they almost felt less of a need for any revisions. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the two don't have to be at odds. And Danny Shapiro, who's a great writer of fiction and nonfiction and a great teacher of writing, talks a lot about artistic integrity versus real life relationships. Do they have to be at odds? And they don't. I was sort of happily surprised at some feedback I got from family members, encouraged revisions I made that actually improved the integrity of the work. They improved the storytelling and also made that person feel better. And if it does both, that's great. Yeah, because I wasn't seeking vengeance. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but I also want to stand by my truth. You know what I mean? So that can be emotionally tricky for everybody, for sure.
Well, as I think someone said, and maybe it was you, if someone has their own story to tell, they can write their own memoir. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think Rosalind Carter said that famously to Jimmy Carter when, she wrote her memoir and they were being interviewed together and he said, well, this didn't happen like that. And actually this, and I said that. And she said, Jimmy, this is my memoir. You can write your own.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what are people's expectations coming out of a class? I mean, do people think, oh, I'm going to write something and I'm going to get it published and, it's going to be on the New York Times bestseller list? Mm-hmm. Or are people just content just to have written it, just to have that something has been satisfied? What do you think? What do you think the expectations are in your class?
I think it really ranges. And I am challenged by both extremes of that spectrum because the people who say, oh, I'm just doing it for me, have a harder time taking in feedback along the lines of the who cares question. Like, well, it's just for me anyway. I'm doing it for myself. Well, you're in a workshop, though, so you're at least doing it for the 12 people sitting around this table. Like, we're your audience, so make us care. Entertain and enlighten us at least. And then at the other end, when people kind of jump over the craft because they're so intent on publishing, I try to I'm like, good to be ambitious and I will help you tell a story that other people will care about. But we have to focus on the craft first. Like we have to write before we talk about how we put it out there. You have to have something to put out there. So, you know what I mean? Some people are accelerating it and other people are content just doing it for some catharsis. And that's the only reason. Like if you get that also, that's great. But if you're in a workshop, then you are sort of tasked with at least making us care, you know, those of us in the workshop, at least, right?
Do you find that people come to these workshops, and I have to say I was one who had never really done much writing. Are people naturally good writers, or do you find that is the craft of writing sometimes dismissed by some people as like, oh, I don't need to, you know, put in all these, you know, these extra words. I just want to get the story out. What's your experience in working with people who are not maybe natural writers? I'd put it that way.
Right. And writing is tricky as an art form because we all write in up to a point in our day-to-day lives, whether it's emails or texts, although that's about, you know, the most minimal kind of, you know, writing you could have.
Right.
But there's this idea, it's not like playing the violin where we don't all like play the violin in our day-to-day lives. So some people think it's not a craft or a skill that needs to be honed, but of course it does. And it's also subjective like every art form. You know, I'm not here to say this is good writing or bad writing. The idea of coming to learn, and I think also if it's a memoir workshop, as compared to, say, a fiction workshop, there may even be less tolerance for or less awareness of the craft. You know, people might be intimidated a bit by like, I can't write a novel or I don't know how to write a fictional story. But if it's memoir, again, you know what happened. It happened to you and you are the authority of your experience, which is true. You are. And I say that to every therapy client. They are the authority of their experience. That doesn't equal it's automatically a great compelling story that people will care about. So as opposed to fiction where they're like, you know, teach me how to write fiction. I have no idea. So hopefully people come with a beginner's mind and, you know, any class or workshop, you are a student and that's a great thing. And you're there to learn. And you're still the authority of your experience, but maybe the teacher can help you how to tell the story in the most effective way. Again, the teacher and the classmates are not critiquing the life, but maybe we can help you convey it, communicate it more engagingly. So being open to that. But some people are quite resistant. You know, they'll get feedback. Like I said, someone says, I'm confused or I don't find it believable that the protagonist reacted in this way. And then the author might say, well, I did react that way. And it's like, yes. And the way you tell it is not believable. Let's investigate why. Why are you not convincing us yet? I believe you that it happened, but what are you doing on the page that's not working yet? To that point, and I learned this way back when I started teaching writing, and you know this from Sarah Lawrence, I have the rule of not letting the person who's up for workshop speak, because if every comment that's made, the author responds with explaining, then they're not going to have much time to get the feedback that's useful to them. Because again, all you're giving us are the words on the page. So if you need to verbalize, 10 minutes of what else happened in your life, put it here.
Exactly. Yeah. Something you're not writing it down, and you can't respond to every single person who might be reading it.
And you're not really listening, like just take it in. And then, I let them respond at the end of the entire workshop, but it's very hard. I mean, I see people like, I want to explain. I want to see something. I'm like, wait, you'll get a chance at the end, but like for your own sake, like just, button the lip and listen,
Listen, that can be really hard.
Yeah.
Do you find that people want to write before they've actually done much reading?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is a great point to make. And any workshop I teach, and I learned this in grad school myself, that input affects output. So even, when I teach a weekend workshop at Iowa, 2 days, 8 hours together, it's really short. I still give short reading. You always, and it pertains, of course, to the writing prompts or whatever we're focusing on in the workshop. And I always give a recommended list, which is ever expanding. I take recommendations from students, memoirs that they admire. And so I send them off with a long list of memoirs that are excellent in different ways to inspire them. So I think that's crucial. First step of writing is to read as much as possible, any genre.
Yeah. And somehow I think that's missing these days, right? I heard someone say, we don't need more writers, we need more readers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're, the whole art of writing something about your life, making someone else care about it.
Yes.
It's not important that it happened to you. It's important that other people have to care about what happened to you, or you have some way of,
Well, it's sometimes I try again. I always give feedback with respect, even if it's I tell it straight too. Is I can tell that you, the author, feel very passionately about this. I'm not yet feeling passionate about it. How can you tell it in a way where I share your interest in this moment? Right.
I'm wondering what advice you would have for people who are like listening to us and saying, wow, I want to try this. I've got a story to tell. What advice do you have?
Well, if you did want to take a workshop, as you know, the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence is a great place for adult non-matriculating students, and they tend to be several week-long workshops, meeting, once a week for several weeks. And it's a great place to get feedback and get guidance from a teacher. And Iowa is similar. It's in Iowa City, and the Summer Writing Festival is for 2 months every summer, June and July. And you go for a week or a week and a weekend, and each week and weekend, multiple workshops are offered, and you take one. So you're very much in a writing community. It's IRL, in real life, which is really nice. It's one of the things I missed the most during the pandemic, actually.
Sure.
I've been teaching there since 2008, other than that hiatus during COVID. And again, it's similar to Sarah Lawrence, but it's more concentrated. You meet in workshop every day, and with the same group of people. And often the idea is to leave your time in Iowa with a work in progress, and maybe with ideas about publishing. And maybe you work with that teacher or someone else as an individual writing coach, which I've done with former workshop students when they start getting really serious about their own work. And I certainly have resources of great writing coaches. A lot of them work virtually, which is convenient. It can also be helpful if you don't feel like committing to a workshop or a writing coach, finding really good readers, or even finding a friend who wants to pursue writing too, and you share work. Someone who's writing and whose opinion you respect. You have to choose the right person who would work well with you, and then you can do it for free. I was surprised to see that my local library has a writing group. Sure.
I haven't been a part of that, but it's like, oh, that's a free resource.
That's really nice.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could wrap up by your giving my listeners who might be interested in starting off, could you give us a prompt?
Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah. A prompt or two. Give us an idea.
Sure. Well, I have so many of them, and I come up with new ones all the time. One that is one of my favorites that I mentioned earlier, and which I'm borrowing from Patricia Hampel, who is one of my professors in grad school, was to write about a past experience in the present tense. So, the first step is to choose an interesting, dramatic, watershed moment, whatever why are you choosing that moment? Why is it important to you? And you might be alone, you might be engaging with other people. Let's say you're 5, let's say you're 16, but it's a while in the past, and you think it's important, but you may be having trouble accessing it emotionally, physical details, circumstances. It's an amazing trick that you play on your brain to help you mine your memories. You know, if I'm writing about something when I was 6, let's say 50 years ago, so, you know, I don't know how clear, you remember it more clearly if it's important to you, but still, what's very interesting is to first write about it in the past tense. In other words, I'm here today in 2025 remembering, which is the more natural tense, because that is the truth. I am here as an adult remembering when I was 6. So you write that version, and then take a day or two, like take space away from it, and write about that same moment or scene or incident in the present tense. I am 6 years old. And the reason to take the space is it's not to simply have the same exact version with the verb tenses changed. Like, don't look at the past tense version. Like, think of that moment fresh and think of it as a 6-year-old. Because the learning experience, the interesting part is the differences between the two versions. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. In an adoptive mom support group I have, so again, I was doing this therapeutically, but it's just as useful in a craft workshop. An adoptive mother wrote about going to Colombia to pick up her son. She adopted internationally. And so in the past tense version, she covers all kinds of ground. You know, it's the night before, and then she gets on the plane, she's in Colombia, and she's meeting the foster parents, and she's meeting the birth parents. Actually, she had the opportunity to do that. She's holding him in her arms, end of the story. Because I give them a word limit. Let's say it's 500 words, like 2 pages. When she wrote it in the present tense, she didn't get past the packing scene. Oh. And it gives me chills still to think about it, because it was so emotionally, she slowed down because she was able to get back in touch with all of the anticipatory feelings she was having. And she was excited, of course, to finally build her family, but she was also thinking so much about the birth mother and feeling bad that, you know, joy for me is sadness for her and a gain for me is loss for her. And what about the foster parents who've been taking care of him for 3 months? And it's a loss for them, and I'm so grateful to them. And she was having all these thoughts and feelings while she was, and what are the right things to bring? And am I bringing a gift? And it was amazing how the arc, because it still had to be 500 words, slowed down and covered so much more emotional ground, but less plot, you know? So she was fascinated by that. And she realized, oh, I didn't understand that was all going on for me emotionally. And so she really learned more about herself.
Do you find that in workshop, people will write something and then someone will say, you know, I think this is what's really happening. And the writer suddenly has that moment of, oh my gosh, you're right. And I didn't even know I was writing that. But there's a deeper truth that a reader finds that the writer doesn't even know that they're writing it.
Yes. And that is when the semantics in a workshop are really important, because that can be very jarring, of course, to the author who had the life experience. Yeah. And sometimes the reader isn't correct about that. But again, something about your words on the page is giving me that impression. Mm-hmm. So it's not like your, you know, classmate is your therapist, you know, that's not appropriate. I'm not telling you what was really going on for you in your life. That's not my right as a workshop participant or as a workshop leader, frankly. So, but isn't it interesting that, oh, you know, if I'm the author, oh, you know, my classmate took that away from it. That does give me insight, and maybe that is what I was thinking, feeling, or, oh no, that's not what I was thinking and feeling at all. Isn't that interesting that the way I wrote it is giving you that impression? Let me revise it. Mm-hmm. You know, so the response could be in either way, but that's why it's very important to speak in the third person and, you know, not to say, well, what was really going on for you was this. Like we cannot, that's a boundary. That's not okay.
Yeah, that's a boundary, right?
But yeah, either you gain insight if you're open-minded and if that is the truth, or you're okay with hearing that feedback and you think, oh, I got to get back to the drawing board because that's not, but now I see why you thought that as a reader. You know what I mean? So I need to fix that.
Well, so when it has happened to me, I'm like, wow, you're like, it gives me insight into whatever was happening
Yeah.
that I didn't even really know. There's something subconscious
Yes.
there. And honestly, I find it amazing when that happens.
Yes. If you're open to it, you can learn so much about your writing and also about yourself.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Saffian, this has been an amazing conversation, and I feel like we could go on for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that you came into the studio today to share your amazing insights into writing, and I encourage everyone who's listening, follow some of Sarah's prompts and see what you come up with. It can be a very fulfilling, energizing, thoughtful exercise for us all. And I appreciate your coming in, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. So interesting to talk.
Great. Thanks.
I'd love to know if you're doing something creative in your midlife. Please reach out to me at yourcreativemidlife.com. And if you liked us, please give us a thumbs up and leave a review. Thanks again. I'm Betsy Bush.